Members and members of the public, good evening. I think Councillor Parker is literally on her way in, but we will get going. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Plan Subcommittee, 19th of June. Welcome to members of the committee, members of the public in the audience. Very nice to see you, and welcome also to anybody watching on the Council's YouTube channel. Apologies for absence. I have a couple. Councillor Ritchie, who has appointed Councillor Schwer as his substitute, and Councillor Walsh, who has appointed Councillor Wright. Everybody else is here. So Councillor Parker, I think, is due imminently. Declarations of interest. I'll just start by doing a joint declaration for Councillor Van Dulken, who's one of the speakers this evening, who is obviously District Councillor, who is known to members of the committee, so I'll do a joint declaration on that, and also on Councillor Philip Rawlinson, Parish Councillor for Great Yeldham, who is known to many of us, so I will do that. Any others? Councillor Butland.
Yes, Madam Chairman, a non-registrable interest in item number 5, in that Councillors Duffin, Dr Dyson and Councillor Ruffle, who are speakers, are known to me as members of Great Bardfield Parish Council. And item 9, Councillor Rawlinson, who I am aware of, and Councillor Van Dulken.
Thank you. Councillor Schwer?
I intend to stay and vote.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Schwer, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. A disclosable personal interest in agenda item 7, Great Maplestead. And I shall leave the room for the duration of that item and then return.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, item 8, rain. I do know and have conversations over the years with the owner of King's Nurseries, and I am a customer there, Tree Nursery. Not in any sense of any greater than anyone else, but if it helps, I could leave the room for that item. Take advice.
Alison, do you want to?
I think it would be better if you leave for that item, Councillor Abbott. Yeah.
Okay, right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Anybody else? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much indeed. In the same vein as Councillor Butland, Councillor Duffin is known to me, but I intend to stay in the meeting and vote accordingly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Schwer.
Yeah, Councillor Duffin is also known to myself. So I think I just better follow everybody else and declare.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's that, I think, done. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. We've had the minutes through for the 5th of June, which have been circulated. Does anyone have any comments or amendments on those at all? No? Could you move, and Councillor Bowser second? Does that find agreement? Yeah. Okay, just before we move on to public question time, a couple of other things. So, members, the Gosfield and Silver End sites were deferred. They are now confirmed for the meeting on the 24th of July, just to give you a heads up on that. And the Coggeshall sites will be on the 31st of July meeting. We will make that clear on the website as well, and you'll get an email around about that, but I just thought I'd give you the heads up now. So that's Gosfield and Silver End, 24th of July, Coggeshall, 31st of July. Okay. Right, public question time. We have 8 speakers registered this evening. I will do what we now regularly do at these meetings, which is I will ask the speakers to come forward immediately before the item they're interested in, but I'm also going to just reorder the agenda so that 1 or 2 people who are registered to speak a bit further down don't have to sit here for ages, although I'm sure it's fascinating. But so we're going to do it in the order. We'll start with item 5, the first one anyway, Finchingfield and Great Bardfield, because I have speakers on both of those. Then we will take agenda item 8, which is Great Notley, Panfield and Rain. We just have speakers on the Rain sites. Then item 9, Great Yeldham, where we have a couple of speakers. And then item 16, Ridgewell. So we'll do 5, 8, 9, 16, and then we'll go back to the agenda order as you've got it printed, all right? And those who are registered to speak, we are being very strict on the 3-minute rule, only because we've got a lot to get through. If you're partway through a sentence, that's fine, please carry on and finish, but I'm not going to allow people to go on sort of longer than that. But all members of the committee have had copies of your statement sent round earlier today, so we have got them to look at anyway. All right, I think we will make a start then. So we will start with item 5, which is the Regulation 18 draft allocations for Finchingfield and Great Bardfield. And the first speaker I have on this is Councillor Roger Duffin, who wants to speak on Finchingfield. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and Subcommittee. Thank you very much indeed for letting me come and speak on behalf of Finchingfield Parish Council. When I put my speech together, I didn't know that it was circulated beforehand, so you're probably wondering why am I coming in to talk to you about it. The reason is we are very impressed with the amount of work that Braintree District Council have put into the review of the local district plan. So this is a short comment, but we in Finchingfield also take our little bit of the district plan really seriously. We put a lot of work into it, which is why I'm here, just to state that. It's a very short statement, as you see, probably the shortest ever. We note the Planning Officer's recommendations to the subcommittee, which are similar to those submitted by the Parish Council in our submission. We are on the same page as the District Council, and therefore we urge the subcommittee to approve the recommendations of the Planning Department. I cannot tell you how much, this isn't in my speech, how much delight it gives me to say that I'm on the same page as the District Council. It's a lovely experience. We are working hard, not because I'm always on a different page, but there have been examples in the past long ago when it's happened. We are working extremely hard on a neighbourhood plan in conjunction with Wethersfield Parish Council. Our research on this has shown that actually there's not much need for houses in the local area. This is what the residents tell us. We spent a lot of time on the research there. There is a small requirement for low-cost entry-level housing. So we're pleased that we're not down for anything big. It chimes with what I was told in the past, that big developments are going on around the main roads and around the towns. We are aware that Braintree are targeted with, I think the last figure I heard was 1,115 houses per year. Finchingfield, we're not walking away scot-free. This is the point that I'm mentioning this. Finchingfield has actually had 70 houses approved and built over the last couple of years. That is a huge increase, and if you look at the houses that we had, that's actually a 22% increase in our area, which is a very big increase. So we're not walking away scot-free, but we've built our total share, or our share of the total that's required to cover a good few years, if not decades ahead. So that's the end of my short speech. Thank you very much indeed for your time, gentlemen and Chairman. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Duffin. Thank you for your kind comments. The next speaker I have is Dr. Janet Dyson from Great Bardfield Historical Society, who wants to speak on the Great Bardfield draft allocations.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Good evening.
The 3 areas concerned are all sites of particular historical interest. First, the Glebe Meadow. The Historical Society strongly opposes the inclusion of the Glebe Meadow in the call for sites. The District Council's Conservation Character Appraisal and Management Plan 2019, an excellent document, I have to say, highlights the interesting topographical variation of the village, where changes of level enhance the views and provide interesting variety. Our 14th century church can be seen from many positions in the village. One of the finest uninterrupted views of the church can be seen from the central village greens, looking up the hill across Glebe Meadow, which is the site in question. Churchill is visible from main locations within the village. There are significant views across Glebe Meadow to the old vicarage grounds and the church. Its extra large clock is particularly prominent from this location. Any development of Glebe Meadow would be a serious violation of the character of the village, and a precious view would be lost forever. Second site, the valley of the River Pant, Beslins Lane. Great Bardfield derives considerable historical significance from its association with the Bardfield artists of the 1930s to the 1980s, a group of 18 artists, including notably Edward Borden, Eric Revilliers, John Aldridge, Terza Garwood, lived in and around the village, inspired by the village itself and the surrounding countryside, which features in many of their work. We consider that this area should be given particular protection. A conservation report notes the importance of the Pant Valley, highlighting that from the Grade 2 listed road bridge, there are views up and down the valley of the Pant, linking the village to its historic river valley landscape. Thirdly, the Deer Park View site. Great Bardfield is a doomsday village. It's grown organically over 1,000 years around its original footprint. We have 73 designated heritage assets in the conservation area, buildings ranging from the 13th to the 19th century. The shape of the medieval village can still be seen clearly in the historic centre, and the physical imbalance which would result from further development is evident. We believe it's essential to consider the wider setting of Great Bardfield, which is overwhelmingly rural. Vital to look beyond the conservation boundary and consider how the village sits within the wider landscape. Village draws a significance particularly from its setting and the valleys of the River Pant, the Bardfield Brook, and the site of the proposed development includes part of the historic Deer Park, first enclosed in 1240, which was enjoyed by some significant historic figures, including Elizabeth de Burgh, who owned the manor, Edward the Black Prince, who hunted in the Deer Park and was son of Edward III, who is commemorated in Bardfield Church. The social and cultural impacts of further development of this site on the existing community should be considered carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dyson. The third speaker I have on the Great Bardfield, Finchfield and Great Bardfield sites is Councillor Carolyn Ruffle from Great Bardfield. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I represent Bardfield Parish Council, and we agree wholeheartedly with the Planning Officer's recommendation that none of the 3 sites proposed for Great Bardfield be recommended for development. We understand the demands put on local councils to increase the housing stock in their districts and do not oppose all development in the parish. We undertake regular housing needs surveys, with one resulting in a scheme of 12 affordable homes some years ago. A more recent survey found minimal need. Our upcoming neighbourhood plan, which we note is not referred to in the agenda to this meeting, unlike that for Finchingfield and Wethersfield, is in its final stages, awaiting BDC's final approval and the community referendum. This plan supports the development of small-scale housing sites in the parish to meet local needs which are at an affordable level relative to the average local income. Our village is best served by well-designed small-scale development. The proposed sites are large for a village the size of Great Bardfield and could support over 50 houses in each location. Each is located on land that is inappropriate for development and outside the village envelope. Glebe Meadow is in the conservation area and is one of the most important green spaces in the village, sitting within the valley of the Bardfield Brook. It has been protected from development for many years and provides one of the iconic views of the Grade 1 listed parish church from the village centre. Our emerging neighbourhood plan states that development will not be supported where it will have a detrimental visual impact on the key landscape and built development features, as identified in the Great Bardfield Landscape Assessment. The neighbourhood plan also identifies Glebe Meadow as a local green space which has protection under national planning policy for the green belt. The proposed site off Beslins Lane is on a slope above the environmentally important valley of the River Pant, extending down to the river and into the floodplain. Any development would be visually intrusive and set a dangerous precedent along the valley of the River Pant. Access is from a narrow protected lane with high banks and hedges limiting visibility. Any additional traffic would be damaging to the protected lane and dangerous to other road users. Further development adjacent to Deer Park View to the south would create an extensive urban-style scheme on arable land at the edge of the historic village. Recently, a proposal for 56 houses on this site was dismissed on appeal. A scheme of this size would be considered excessive. The proposed site rises to the south. Any further development would have significant impact on the first views of Great Bardfield along the Braintree Road and views out to the countryside from the historic centre. In the last few years, our infrastructure and services have been stretched by the building of over 50 new properties in the village, and we believe it is unable to support any further significant development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ruffle. Right, members, that concludes the speakers on the first agenda item. So we will now turn to the report, which is going to be presented by Julie.
Good evening. Before I begin, to go through the sites, I would like to clarify a few points. Paragraph 3.9 of the agenda is the list of sites which we will be looking at today in Finchinfield. Finch 2502, former RAF Wethersfield, Sculpins Lane, is listed in the table, but it will not be considered at this meeting, but grouped with Wethersfield, and it will be brought to a later committee meeting. I would also like to mention, to highlight that both Great Bardfield and Finchinfield Parish Councils are presently preparing neighbourhood plans, and Finchinfield is preparing a joint one with Wethersfield Parish. Both plans have undertaken Reg 14 consultations. However, neither are made, and so cannot yet be used in the assessments of sites within their area. Parish comments, however, are reported with the individual sites in the reports. And if we go on to Finchinfield 2134. This first site is Finchinfield 2134, land south of Wethersfield Road, and this is shown for, this has been put forward for housing development, custom built bungalows for the over 55s and market housing. Before I go further, I would like to make a correction to paragraph 3.21, line 2 of the committee report. The sentence which begins with both sites were the subject of the appeal should be replaced by Finch 2134 and the land to the east was the subject of the appeal. And the next slide shows the area to which that appeal applied. This site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraphs 3.21.
Yes, I'll look for questions a bit further on, I think. Yeah, okay. Sorry.
The next site is land.
Madam Chairman, sorry.
Yes.
Can Julie move the mic closer because she speaks often anyway, and then when the air conditioning
It's on, is it hard to hear? Okay, yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, fine.
Oh, that's better.
That's good. Land west of the B1057 Finchinfield, and this site has already been allocated in the local plan, and this site has been the subject of a planning application, which means that its development boundary has to be altered such as it encloses the planning application, and it has been adopted in the local plan, and it's not recommended for any change.
Okay.
Finchinfield 2136, land at Duck End Finchinfields. This has been put forward for 10 to 30 dwellings at the lower end of the site, and is not been recommended for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.39. The next site is Finch 2137, Hole Farm, Stambourne Road, Finchinfield. This has been put forward for solar energy production. The site covers 162 hectares and lies approximately 2.4 kilometres northeast from Finchin Fields along the B1057. Part of the site has been the subject of a screening opinion, and potential impacts identified include heritage, landscape and ecology. The site is not proposed for allocation sites, and the reasons are set out from paragraph 3.53. The next site is Finch 2138, lands north of the B1058. This has been put forward for housing, but the site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out starting from paragraph 3.65. Finchin Field 2139, land west of the B1057, Cornish Hall End, Finchin Field. Finchin Field, this site has been put forward for housing but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out at paragraph 3.75. The last site is Finchin Field 2013, Great Biggins Farm. This has been put forward for housing but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.84. And that is the final one of the Finchin Fields sites.
Right, thank you, Julie. I'll just pause there to see if any members have any comments that they wish to make on any of those. No? Right, yes, Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Move officers' recommendation, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Is that find a seconder, please? Councillor Butland.
Go through the Great Bardfield site as well.
Yes. Do we need to take them all together?
We can do it as 2 votes, that's fine.
Should we do that? Do the
Do a
Finching
vote for
Field,
Finching
the
Field
vote
and then a
for
vote
Finching
for,
Field.
for Great Bardfield.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's just straightforward. Right, so that's been moved and seconded that we accept officers' recommendations on the Finching Field sites. Is that generally agreed? Can I just have a quick show of hands, please? Yes? Thank you, members. Right, thank you, Julie. We'll move on to Great Bartfield.
The first site is land rear of Deer Park View, and that is GRBA 2165. This has been put forward for housing but is not allocated for the reasons set out at paragraph 3.100. Next site is GRBA 2166, Riverdale House, Beslins Road. This has been put forward for custom and self-build housing, but is not allocated for the reasons set out starting from paragraph 3.107. The next site, GRBA 2504, land to the north west of the vicarage. This has been put forward for housing, but is not allocated for the reasons set out starting from paragraph 3.120. And the final is that recommendation number 11, that the development boundary for Bridgend is reinstated.
I think that's recommendation 12.
Yeah. Sorry, pardon.
Yeah, recommendation 12, yeah. Right, members, anybody have any comments on any of those? No?
Move recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Butland, and seconded by Councillor Bowes-Flint. Does that find agreement, please? Thank you very much, members. Right, so that concludes agenda item 5. So we will now jump down to agenda item 8, which is the draft allocations for Great Notley, Panfield and Rain. And I have 2 speakers on this. The first one is Mr. Paul Taylor, who wishes to speak on rain allocations. Mr. Taylor. No, you've just put your microphone off. That's all right.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Not the best start.
No, that's all right. Well done.
Yep. So, just to explain why I'm here tonight, my name is Paul Taylor. I'm an architect who lives in Rain. I've lived in Rain most of my life, for almost 35 years now. So I've come to know the village quite well, and why I think it's such a desirable place to live. So I have a few comments on the application for the sites Rain 2236 and Rain 2244. The first comment which I'd like to make is about the location of the site, that it is obviously outside the development boundary, although I know that process comes into why we're here tonight, but it's also the extent and scale of the development. I have submitted in my written objection an overlay of Rain, the village as it is now with the development boundary, with the highlighted proposed sites for allocation outlined in red. And I think it's fair to say that I think the proposed allocation, if approved, would almost increase Rain in size by 50 to 60%. At the last census meeting, at the last census for the village, the population was 2,300. So on that basis, are we potentially looking at an increase in the population of 1,100 people in the village? And then that falls down to infrastructure. The local primary school is a one-form entry primary school, which I believe a lot of the classes are already full. The location part of the site allocated Rain 2236 is also positioned within flood zones 2 and 3. Flood zone 2 having a medium probability of flooding, and flood zone 3 having a high probability of flooding. If approved, it's likely that a lot of the houses are likely to require raised ground floor levels, which I think is something which will probably be out of character with the housing of Rain. Something which I don't think was in the officer's report is the fact that there are 4 established and actively used footpath routes which go through the site allocation as currently proposed. I'm not quite sure how they're meant to work with the development. Heritage considerations are quite high on the agenda as well. Obviously, the Flitchway is a non-designated heritage asset, but I think more importantly is the grouping of 10 listed, 10 Grade 2 listed buildings which are just north of the street, Haverings Farmhouse and associated farm buildings. At the moment, the proposed site allocation 2236 looks like it would completely engulf that listed grouping of buildings. I think it's quite unique that you've got a cluster of 10 separately listed Grade 2 listed buildings in such a close proximity of itself. And I'd hope the council would take into respect the historic views coming in and out of the village, both from the street and from the Flitchway.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, very much indeed. Next speaker is Councillor Jan Rickwood, also wanting to speak on Rain sites.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Councillor Jan Rickwood, Vice Chair of Rain Parish Council. Rain Parish Council and many of its residents are extremely disappointed to see the proposed allocation of the land west of Rain and Station Road. Rain is a second-tier village with limited infrastructure. We have no healthcare provision and our primary school is already full to capacity. Residents rely heavily on private transport to meet even basic needs. Our local roads are already stretched and any additional traffic will only worsen an already unsustainable situation. But this is not just about infrastructure. It is about the integrity and identity of our village. The proposed allocation would surround protected TPO trees, irreversibly impact nearby listed buildings, and erode the village's western boundary, fundamentally altering Rain's rural character. It would destroy natural habitats, disrupt wildlife corridors, and permanently alter the green spaces that provide biodiversity and the wider local ecology. perhaps more concerning, is the impact on the Flitch Way, a place that BDC has consistently described as one of the jewels in the crown of Braintree District. A planning inspector confirmed it to be a non-designated heritage asset, with rural settings contributing directly to its significance. In recent past, BDC has spent thousands of pounds defending this principle against development further down the line, so why now allocate housing right alongside this cherished amenity? Plot 3 of the proposed site is flat, open farmland. From the Flitch Way, users enjoy wide, uninterrupted views to the north and south with defined rural character. Any attempts to mitigate the impact through planting, fencing or screening will still urbanise the space and destroy the visual connection. And just beyond this site lies the proposed 98 MW solar farm. If both go ahead, the Flitch Way will no longer mark the edge of open countryside. It will be squeezed between housing and infrastructure, the rural setting and character lost forever. Let me be clear, Rain Parish Council objects to this allocation in its entirety. It is too large, too damaging, and fails to reflect the needs, scale or setting of our village. If, despite our strong objection, the committee chooses to remove the entire site, then at the very least the parcels adjoining the Flitch Way and Station Yard must be excluded. The harm to landscape, heritage and public amenity in these areas will be profound and irreversible. Allowing development would undermine everything the District Council has previously stood for in defence of the Flitch Way. We recognise the need for housing, but the need must be met with care and balance. Development should respect place, protect heritage, and safeguard the environment for future generations. Please protect Rain. Please protect the Flitch Way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rickwood, very much indeed. Right, that concludes the speakers for this item, so we now go to the report. And Julie.
But it's for the tree nursery item, not for the whole thing.
Oh,
So I don't
right,
know how I don't know how you want to manage that, Madam Chair.
Well, just leave for that item, Councillor Abbott.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to miss the whole.
Split out the vote for Rain. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, yes, and I think we'll take the vote on Rain separately. I think we need to do that. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Right, Julie.
Thank you. The first site is Rain 2235 at School Lane, and this site has been put forward for housing but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.11. The next site is Rain 2236. Land west of Rain has been put forward for housing and has been recommended for allocation for the reasons set out in the report starting 3.22. This site comprises 3 plots, one north and 2 south of Dunmow Road at Rain's western edge. There are various constraints associated with these sites, and hence they have been allocated for landscape-led residential developments. Both the northern and southern areas are close to the development boundary and can access the streets. They are close to village services and facilities, and service providers such as the Education Authority and the NHS will be consulted on how the additional needs generated can be accommodated. There are a number of constraints, and the sensitive design would certainly be needed. The northern site has a right of way through a TPO protected avenue, and there is a higher flood risk in this area, and this flood risk also extends into the existing housing area. This too is a TPO woodland adjacent to it. The site lies, and I would make the point though that this area of higher flood risk is a relatively small area, and would not be of a size that would compromise the whole development. The site lies to the west and to the rear of a set of listed buildings, and sensitive design would be needed here, and the site would be subject to a heritage assessment as part of the local plan process going forward. The next photograph, we've got a photograph here which is taken from inside the site and looks south from the rear of the avenue of trees towards the listed buildings. I'm afraid that was a dark January when that one was taken. The southern site boundary lies adjacent to the Flitch Way, a very popular public footpath, local wildlife site and local nature reserve. And the point of entry to the Flitch Way retains the former Rain railway station, now Grade 2 listed, with a railway carriage museum, and these form a destination for visitors. These areas, again, they will need to receive sensitive design, but overall, officers believe that the site can be allocated and can be designed in such a way as to minimise impact on the Flitch Way. I would also point out that there is some woodland which is adjacent to the Flitch Way, which we would certainly want to see retained. The site is recommended for approval for allocation.
Julie, could I just ask something? I may have missed it. Do we know how many houses are proposed for that site? Have we had any indication?
We've had no figure given to us.
Right. Okay.
So on the back of that, Madam Chairman, how many can it accommodate?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, if we were applying sort of a standard density to the site, so it's about 19 hectares in total, you could, in theory, get about 480 houses on there. However, the proposal has been for a more landscape-led approach, which would suggest that a much lower density would be sought on the site. So we'd probably be looking at something closer to 300. Okay.
Okay. I'm just wondering the best way.
Before we carry on.
Yes, I think, given that this is allocated for development, would anybody else like to speak on this? Because then I think we'll take a vote on this one. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Two things. I noticed it going through the whole report, and you know, so what I always say, I know officers have got a huge amount to deal with these. Most of the villages, we have tables which say the area and the amount of houses, and this one we didn't, which does make it a bit difficult. Even if it was an indicative amount, that would be useful. But the point, you know, has already been made. But if we could have that for everyone, I believe it's within our gift to split sites. I'm not at all happy with the juxtaposition with the Flitch Way, which we have, as speakers have rightly said, protected very robustly, including an appeal, and yet we're now proposing a major housing development right up to it. And one of those southern parcels also had a number of TPOs in it, which further constraints. Is it in our gift to say, of the three parcels, we'd prefer one rather than the other two?
Can I look to officers for an answer on that? Yes,
Yeah,
apparently.
that'd be
Yes,
fine.
we can. Yep, we can. Councillor Cunningham.
I'm as someone who's relatively local to the area. I'm personally very saddened to see the possibility of the developable area of Rain increased to this extent. And I totally sympathise and agree with the comments made by Councillor Abbott regarding, and indeed by the representative from the community, particularly protecting the Flitch Way. I'm very, very conscious that on a number of occasions, including relatively recently around this committee table, we made the case strongly for the Flitch Way and protecting the Braintree side of Rain Village to ensure there isn't any danger of future coalescence with the urban Braintree rolling straight into the village of Rain. I think it's absolutely appropriate that at the other end of Rain, that similar protections are put in place. It's not just the building out of Rain; it's the the vagueness of which could possibly be there. And I totally appreciate, and as always, Alan answers it to the point with the factual detail. Yes, there is a potential for a high density of houses there, but it's unlikely that, you know, we would find that acceptable. As we know with the planning system, if we're weak on our policy, we open ourselves up to, should we say, gross misinterpretation and the weakness of our ability and a weak position and a weak ability to defend when it comes to planning appeal, when we know that the cogs of the system don't always work. So when we have the situation where, despite the best of intentions, we're putting through the planning permissions and the 5-year housing supply isn't there, or a housing inspector takes a different interpretation when there is a 5-year, we know we're at these historical weaknesses. So therefore, my personal preference would be to remove all of the 3 parcels from the joint allocation at this time, be very, very policy firm on that, appreciate and to try and give the village of Rain as much resilience as possible in terms of unwanted development. I think if we agree to 1 or 2 of those parcels without greater clarity at this stage, we weaken the overall position further down the line.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, first I'd like to say I support both Councillor Abbott and Councillor Cunningham of what they've just said. I was going to say something very similar. I was saying that I support both Councillor Abbott and Councillor Cunningham. I was going to say something very similar, but the point I'd like to make now is that there's a typo in 323. It says there's a nursing home. I think that should be a nursery school, not a nursery home. Nursing school rather than nursery school.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wright. Okay.
So I fully support the 2 speakers so far.
Right, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this particular item? Right. So we've had, well, a couple of views on this. Would somebody like to move officers' recommendation to allocate the sites for development? No. Would somebody like to move that we do not allocate all 3 of those plots? Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Buckland. Could I have a show of hands as to not allocate all 3 sites? Thank you. That's almost but not quite unanimous. Anyone against? Councillor Martin. Right, thank you. So that is carried, that we do not allocate those 3 sites. Thank you. Right, Julie, would you like to carry on?
The next site is Rain 2237, excuse me, land south of Dunmore Road, Blake End. And this site has been put forward for housing but is not allocated for the reasons set out at paragraph 3.36. The next site is Rain 2238, Dunmore Road, Blake End. This site has been put forward for employment purposes. However, most of this site lies in Uttlesford district, and that's the larger site, which looks like a child's pram, I think, to the south, the large area to the southwest. This is the part that lies in Uttlesford district. The part which lies in Braintree district is the small nib above that. Now, we can't allocate an area outside the district, as this would make the plan unsound, and allocating this smaller site would not be practical. We would propose that this should be assessed through the planning application process if the proposer wishes to proceed. And as such, this site is not recommended for allocation. Rain 2239, land north west of School Road Rain, is not allocated for development. This site has been put forward for housing, and it is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in 3.51. The next, excuse me, the next site is Rain 2240, southwest of Tamdown Way, Springwood Drive. This is put forward for employment use. The southeast part of the site is already allocated for employment in the adopted plan, and the adjoining area to the west can be seen outside that boundary area. Now, in terms of this site lies, the site outside the boundary lies on green buffer and an archaeological site, and there's an airfield which lies to the west. Now, in terms of the report, there are some additions to be made to paragraph 3.59, and the following paragraph, which is shown in the slide, should be added to the end of paragraph 3.59, and I can read that to you if you would like. It says, it also lies on green buffer. However, this area wouldn't have a material impact on the separation between Braintree and Rain. It also lies on the archaeological sites, and this would be subject to a heritage assessment through the ongoing local plan process. The airfield runway lies to the west, and consultation with the Civil Aviation Authority would be advisable. Given that the approach route for the aircraft affects the northernmost tip only, and that there are already existing employment uses of similar distance and relationship, it is considered at this stage that it should be possible to design a form of employment use on the site which is acceptable. Good structural landscaping along the western boundary would give good separation between the employment and the rural area and enhance wildlife habitat on site. And this site is proposed for approval, for allocation.
All right, Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a bit confused about this. There's a woodland in that site, or was adjacent to it on one of the maps, but then it appears to be inside it on that map. Could you clarify that, please? Because I wouldn't support an allocation which has actually got a woodland within it.
There is a woodland to the north. Is
Okay, just to clarify, when looking at the site, an aerial view of the site, there isn't a woodland on the site we're proposing to allocate. It appears to be some sort of scrub brushland. The aerial does show that there appears to be some traffic movement on there and potentially some fly tipping as well, but there isn't any kind of woodland there. There is some woodland to the north area, but that's not within the boundary of the proposed allocation. And just to touch on the archaeological site, that doesn't necessarily fall within that part of the allocation. It refers to some crop marks which are from a farmer's field. Now, this site actually next door to what we call the triangle site is the part that is currently under agricultural use, and that's the bit where more likely the crop marks actually appear on, rather than this part of the site. But as Julie rightly said, that would all be part of further assessments and also part of the any future planning application process.
Okay, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much. I'm very helpfully looking over Councillor Coleridge's shoulder, who's got Google up, and yes, it looks as though the wood is actually behind the Tamdown Way part of the development. But where the plot of land that we're looking to allocate looks as though, from Google, there's a very fine either tree line or hedge line that is defining the boundary of the property of the plot. Now, I appreciate this is more of a further down the road type, reserve matters, outline planning permission. But I'm wondering if we are minded to allocate that. Is there anything we can put as an informative that actually protects what looks like a well-established hedgerow and definition of the land? I mean, I think, bearing in mind the access from Springwood off Tamdown, Yes, we hope for better weather there, but it is a site where there are, where there is existing businesses, and as I say, hopefully the transport situation will be improved in the not too distant future. So, I think it's difficult to argue against probably allocating this, provided we get certain bits right regarding the hedgerows and the fact that it's not impacting on the airfield, because I know the airfield is still quite a treasured pastime for a number of people in the area, and a lot of small businesses rely on operate on the back of it. So yeah, I think if we could get a bit of clarity on some of that would be helpful.
So,
thank you.
You'd like an informative in there. Officers, do you want to come back on that, please? One or two of those points.
Yeah, so for the hedgerow, we could certainly put some structural landscaping. I think that might be a good idea to include that on a draft map. Put that along the western boundary, I think, quite easily. The airfield, as Julie said, we would the CAA are a consultee. I think there are local plan data, they would also be on the planning database, where they are consulted on certain applications over a certain size. So that should be covered. What's the other point? Apologies. Yes, the structural landscaping and the airfield. Yes, I think it's covered both of those.
Right. Any other comments on that site? Then I think because that's recommended for allocation, I'll take a vote on that. Would anybody like to move recommendation that is allocated, noting the suggested informatives and so on? Councillor Parker moving, thank you, and Councillor Coleridge seconding. Could I have a quick show of hands on that one? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. So that site is allocated at this draft stage. Right, Julie, on you go.
The next site, Rain 2241, land at Andrews Field, is this is a large site and is going to be deferred until a later meeting.
Right. Oh, right, okay.
Do you want to cover that one last, so that Councillor?
Yeah. Well, he's nearly out of the room now, so.
But maybe we'll vote on this one on its own then.
Yes, yeah, we need to do that.
And then
Yep.
get them back.
Yes, that's fine. Okay.
Rain 2242 has been put forward for housing but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.72.
I move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ellsworth. Can I have a second? Councillor Cunningham, quick show of hands, please. Thank you very much. And get Councillor Abbott back. Yeah. Jolly good. Okay.
Rain 2243 40 Shalford Road is put forward for housing but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.80.
Okay. Yep.
Rain 2244 Station Yard, Station Road Rain, is allocated for developments. It's proposed for allocation. This is put forward for housing. This site, although by itself is too small to meet the minimum size for allocation, given that Rain 2236 has been recommended for allocation, this site was also recommended for allocation, and now that the sites that Rain 2236 has been not recommended for allocation, this would remain too small for an allocation on its own. So it is not recommended for.
Right. Thank you. Members, everybody clear on that, because we've not allocated the other one, then this is too small. Okay, thank you.
Rain 2419, land west of Springwood Industrial Estate, has been put forward for employment use, but this site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.96.
Okay.
And the last of the Rain sites is Rain 2510, land east of All Views School Road. Is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.102.
Thanks, Julie. Right, Sarah's just going to clarify. We just need to vote on the ones that we have not already voted on.
Thank you, Chair. So we would be voting on recommendation 1, which is the inset map for Rain. We will be voting, and Great Notley and Penfield, so we'll do the inset map at the end.
Yep.
So we will do recommendation 2, 2235, 4, 2237, 5, 2238, 6, 2239, 8, 2241 is deferred to a future meeting. And then we've got 9, 2240 has been done, so 10, 2243, 11, 2244, which is now not allocated for development, Rain 2419 and Rain 2510. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, yes. So could I have somebody to move those, please? Councillor Bowes-Flint, and a seconder, Councillor Butland, and a quick show of hands, please. Thank you, members. Right, that deals with the Rain draft allocations. Now we move on to Great Notley.
The first site is GNBN 2147, land rear of Paling Cottage. This has been put forward as a housing / specialist housing and care home, but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in 3.112. The next site is GNBN 2148, land west of Queenborough Lane. This has been put forward for employment B1 and B8 and a country park, but it is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.126.
Yep.
GNBN 2149, land south east of Queenborough Lane, has been put forward for specialist housing / care home, but it is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.136. The next site, GNBN 2150, land to the south of Hill House Farm, London Road, Great Notley. This site has been put forward for housing, but is not proposed for the allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.146. GNBN 2151, land south of Flitch Way, is a large site of strategic importance and will be considered at a later committee. GNBN 2152, land off Podsbrook, Braintree, has been put forward as a community or biodiversity net gain facility, though only if housing elements on other sites are permitted. As such, this site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.158. GNBN 2153, land west of Podsbrook, south of the River Brain, has been put forward for housing, but it is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.164. GNBN 2154, land to the rear of 100 London Road, has been put forward for housing, but the site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in 3.171. The next site, two sites were submitted at Slamsey's farm. Both sites straddle the boundary with Chelmsford district, and only those parts within the district can be allocated. We have no objections to be taken from to access being taken from the Horizon site, and there are listed buildings on site. However, we believe that these can be dealt with by sensitive design, and of course they will be subject to the later heritage consultations. The first site is GRNO 2169, land at Slamsey's farm, and this is recommended for approval. The second is also for employment use and is recommended for approval.
Councillor Buckland.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Could I just, it's only a small point, doesn't affect the recommendation, but these areas which are, I'll get the map up, such as 2153 and 2151 are not part of Great Notley. They're not, certainly not part of the parish, and indeed they're not part of the ward. We might just need to tidy that up. I think the ward that they actually come within is probably Braintree West.
Anything north of the Podsbrook is Braintree West.
Yeah,
yes.
probably Braintree West.
But it's
ward.
unparished Braintree, bizarrely. Yes.
But unparished Braintree,
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think the ward in question, I think it was Great Notley, Black Notley, that's why they had the GMB.
Yeah, well, it's not, certainly not in Black.
No.
It's
certainly not in Black Notley
yes,
either.
It was unparished, and I think that's probably what's caused the confusion, but anything, as Councillor Cunningham says, anything north of Flitchway is
Yeah,
Braintree West,
I'm
so
not
we could-
disagreeing with the officer's recommendations, but we might just want to tidy that up in the recommendation.
Yes. Sarah, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
We'll pick that up.
Right, okay. Thank you. Right. Councillor Abbott.
On a similar tack, Madam Chairman. So the black line is the district boundary, and the bit of land not in our district only extends those two small portions to the south of the line. So it's not going to be masses more than that. And the other thing was in the text it said Uttlesford, so it should be Chelmsford. I think in the report it says Uttlesford, it should be Chelmsford.
Yeah. It's page 57.
3185. Is that where it
Because the
says?
racecourse is Chelmsford, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if that could just be clarified as well.
Yeah, okay. Right, yes. Where had Julie got to?
So
Have you?
And that is
You-
that is the final.
Oh, you, right,
site
that
of-
finishes you finished the Great Notley, okay.
Yes, it is Chelmsford, apologies.
Right, we'll make sure that's changed. Okay, anybody, any other comments on Great Notley? And then I think we'll take a vote on that one. Oh, okay. Would anybody like to move? Councillor, with the amendments, okay. Thank you, Councillor Butland. Seconder at all? Councillor Cunningham, show of hands, please, members. Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, good. So now we move on to Panfield.
Panfield 2228, land north of Hall Road, has been put forward for houses, open space, landscaping, and in swales, etc. And it's also proposing a community orchard. This site is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.197. The next site is Panfield 2508, land northwest of Panfield Lane, Braintree. And this site has been put forward for housing and proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.204.
Thank you, Chair.
Is
That's
that-
all the
is-
sites for
right.
Panfield.
Is that one, so 2508, is that allocated? It says,
This is proposed for allocation. It lies adjacent to the an existing strategic growth location.
right, okay. Councillor Parker.
Just a point of clarification. So the report says there's an area immediate to the south designated as an ancient woodland. Could you just indicate where that is on the map? I think where it says Panfield Wood, just in the very bottom left-hand corner of the screen.
Apologies, Crackle Woods, that's there. See a bit, yeah, you can see the name down there. So it's adjacent to the wood there. Yeah, Sarah's got those.
Do we know how many housing on 2508? Just wondered if the site owner had given any indication. It's all right, they may not have done.
I haven't got any.
I don't. There's no number available, but I think based on a density of around 25 dwellings per hectare, I think it's likely to be in the region of 100.
Okay. Councillor Cunningham.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And normally, you could perhaps make a logical case for this site, bearing in mind how development has built out over the Towlands development. I would be extremely nervous at this moment in time to potentially allocate additional housing in that part of Panfield, but also the implications on Bocking and parts of Braintree, when we are still, having tried to do the right thing, still trying to get developers who have behaved in, I'm choosing my language carefully, a somewhat tricky way over the fulfilment of the link road and Springwood to open up the Towlands development to try and relieve some of the unprecedented and highly regrettable congestion on the Braintree network, and of course that also impacts on the local road network out into the villages. So until we have greater clarity, assurance and a timeline for that, any additional development in that wider area I think would be misguided at this moment in time.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Anybody else? Councillor Bowles-Flint?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would actually fully support that due to the fact that my inbox every single day is full of complaints because traffic just literally cannot move round there. And yeah, it is down to what's already happened and we can't seem to get a lot moving. But I would be extremely nervous of putting anything there with the traffic that it is in this town.
Okay. Councillor Coleridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comment is more about what's around that site, and I'm not sure it's that suitable for housing at the current time. I mean, it's right next to the recycling centre and a large industrial site, and it just doesn't feel that appropriate for a housing development.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, I was going to make the same point about the industrial estate nearby, but also how close it is to that woodland. You'd have to have a standoff from that woodland, which is going to restrict the amount of area. And I'm assuming that you've got a green strip there now of trees, so that's a further restriction. But I think the bigger point is the point that other members have made about that part of town and the traffic.
Yep.
And we went to the recycling centre in Braintree recently because there was something we couldn't take to Whittam, so we went to Braintree. And you have to time it, because if you go anywhere near the evening rush hour, you'll be sat there for three quarters of an hour.
Yes, sadly, I think we're all familiar with that. Okay, so I think what we will do is to take two separate votes. So we have Panfield 2228, which is not allocated for development, which seemed relatively uncontroversial. Can I have a Councillor Butland, seconded Councillor Bowers-Flint, show? Oh, sorry, Councillor Parker.
I just did want to make a point on the inset map for Panfield, just to ask a question. Would it be appropriate to do it at this stage or just afterwards, if we're voting just on the site? It's not relating to this site or the other one we were.
Oh, well, we can do. Yes, we can do the inset. Yes, carry on then. Yeah.
Thank you. It's just really in relation to the green buffer between Panfield and Braintree. It's just this site which is sort of on the corner of the road there, next to BOCN 137. I think there have been. There was a planning application on that site which was refused at appeal. I was just wondering whether we should be extending the green buffer to include that. It's just a sort of a question really for officers, whether that would be a sensible thing to do, appropriate thing to do.
Okay, Alan? Yeah.
Just to say that we would be covering the matter with our landscape evidence settlement fringe study. It's reviewing the existing extent of the current green buffers as well as areas around the settlement. If that evidence suggests that there's a good case for a green buffer in that location, then we can certainly include a green buffer. Yeah.
Okay, good. Right, thank you. Right, so we've had a mover and seconder that 2228 is not allocated. Can I have a show of hands? Thank you. And then 2508, which was recommended for allocation. Would anybody like to move that it is not allocated? That seemed to be Councillor Cunningham, the way everything was going. Councillor Bowers-Flint. And could I have a show of hands that that's not allocated? Right. And against? Councillor Martin. Thank you very much. Right, so that's carried, that we don't allocate that site. Okay. Just going to make a note of that. Okay. Okay. Right, that finishes. That. Oh, sorry. The.
Yes.
Yeah. The.
All of the inset maps.
Yes. All. Yes. Sorry, I keep forgetting those. Let me just go back. So recommendation 1 is on the inset maps for Rain, Great Notley and Panfield, that they are approved for public consultation. Right. Councillor Bowers-Flint's moving. Councillor Coleridge, I think, just got in second. Is that agreed, members? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. You need to keep reminding me on that, because I keep forgetting. That's all right. Right, that finishes Great Notley, Panfield and Rain. So we will move on to the next agenda item 9, Great Yeldham, where I have speakers. And the first speaker is Councillor Philip Rawlinson from the Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor. Would you like to put your microphone? Yep, that's it.
Yep,
Well
sorry.
done.
Great Yeldham Parish Council and responses from local residents do not support the proposed sites as indicated on the maps to Great Yeldham. The Parish Council considers that a village of Great Yeldham size, which has recently accommodated 2 large housing developments, 90+ dwellings, should not accommodate any further housing development sites. The village is a rural settlement with constrained infrastructure and limited capacity for significant growth. The Parish Council submitted a full response to the proposed sites in its letter dated 8th of August 2024. In summary, the Parish Council is concerned that the rapid development and expansion on the character of the village through any proposed developments would impact on the character of the village that has developed slowly and organically over time, will have a severe impact on the physical and social infrastructure to meet the demand arising from a large number of new residential developments. The services and facilities within the village are limited, and that further development beyond that previously allocated would not be favoured. Also, the village has limited public transport provision to key service villages and main towns within the district. And inadequate road infrastructure, particularly the narrow leather lane, additional traffic from proposed sites would create significant road congestion. Roads are inadequate, narrow and serve many existing dwellings. Any increase in traffic on these small roads where parking is already severely restricted is increasing an existing problem. The impact on biodiversity and the natural environment, in particular to sites G2177 and 2178 on Toppersfield Road, the sites are in close proximity to the only local wildlife site in the village. 2177 contains a number of protected species, including 8 documented bat species. If the site is accepted, it will cut off any wildlife corridors from the hedge along Toppersfield Road to the designated wildlife site via the grass meadow. 2178, previous planning applications and appeals have been dismissed due to concerns about the landscape impact. The site falls outside of the defined village envelope. If accepted, it will impact on the landscape, further eroding the rural character of this part of the village. Capacity at St Andrew's Church of England School, parishes who live in the village want to be able to send their children to the village school and not travel, if they have transport, to schools located in other villages. There are no health services in the village, with residents accessing oversubscribed GP services in Castle and Civil Hedingham, causing difficulty in getting appointments and accessibility for those who do not have transport. Lack of employment opportunities in the village and limited provision of shops. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlinson. And the next speaker on this is Councillor Richard Van Dalken.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm speaking this evening as the ward member for Great Yeldham, as many of you, or most of you, will be aware, in support of the Parish Council and wider local community view of the sites which have come forward. As you've noted from the report, there's strong local feeling that the recent housing development of 90 new houses, as mentioned by Councillor Rawlinson, which is an increase of about 14% of the village population. With this, Great Yeldham has already absorbed a significant growth with no commensurate increase in infrastructure or bus services or indeed any local services, and in particular no extra school capacity. Consequently, there's no need for further housing provision in or around the village with minimal local employment, and the Parish Council and community therefore opposes, as you've heard, all new housing sites at this time. I'm particularly pleased that the 2 largest sites put forward, 2174 and 2175, both outside the village envelope and with poor road access on agricultural land, are not recommended. I would, however, like to add my continued support to the Great Yeldham employment sites, 2170 and 2172, which are on the A1017 on the way to Castle Hedingham, as well as the adjoining Castle Hedingham site 2076, mainly in Castle Hedingham, which together with the existing Old Council Yard and the Bringbank area owned by BDC, plus the Colne Valley Railway, has the opportunity to make up a coherent but low-profile light industrial area along that part of the A117. It's easily shielded from the road by trees and does provide and can provide more local opportunities for employment, of which there are relatively few in the immediate vicinity. Can I, however, point out that the site Great Yeldham 2172 is being recommended, but strangely not nearby Great Yeldham 2170, immediately adjacent to the Old Council Yard, and which has been the subject of planning application 23/02453/FUL, which has been deferred in the planning process and is, I understand, being closely worked on between developer and planning officers to bring it back to committee in the near future for a decision. I would suggest that this is a contradiction for the site to be not recommended by this subcommittee while it's still the subject of an active planning application on which officer time and effort is being spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dolken. Right, that is the end of the speakers on that item, so we go to the report on Katerina.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members. This presentation summarises the local plan review assessment for the village of Great Yeldham, a second-tier rural settlement in the north of the Braintree Council, the Braintree district. The village has a modest range of local services, namely a primary school, a convenience store, some healthcare provision and limited public transport links along the A1017. Although it benefits from some connectivity to Halstead and Haverhill, it remains rural in character with significant infrastructure constraints. The Parish Council has submitted a comprehensive response strongly opposing further residential development. A total of 9 sites were submitted for consideration, 7 residential, including 3 self and custom built, and 2 for employment use. We will now summarise each site and the assessment conclusions. Site GRYE 2170, land northwest of Old Council Yard. This is a 0.38 hectares greenfield site accessed from Hedingham Road. While physically suitable, this site lies in open countryside. The report incorrectly stated that the application was refused. In fact, it was recommended for refusal due to its location outside the settlement boundary, conflict with the local planning policies, and the unacceptable impact on the rural character. The application was deferred. Still, the recommendation stays, it's not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 313 to 317 on page 72 of the agenda. Can I have the next one, please?
Can I just, thank Katerina, just pause for a moment. So this is the site that, or one of the sites that Councillor Van Dolken spoke on, which is not recommended for allocation. It does have a current planning application, which I think is still to come back to committee at some stage. Councillor Bowles-Flint, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I remember the site, and I think it was me who moved deferment at that planning committee. However, what I will remember and recall and say now is that officer's professional opinion was to recommend it for refusal, and members went against that professional officer's recommendation. So I fully understand why this recommendation is in front of us this evening, because it is a professional officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Bowles-Flint. Anybody else want to comment on that? No. Okay. Councillor Parker.
And the only thing I remember from this site when it did come to the planning committee, or certainly was a report, was that there was a, I think actually wasn't actually at the meeting, but I think there was an issue about there being a pylon right in the middle of that site, a big pylon. And I think National Grid very, very belatedly came back and said, oh, we need to look at whether it's going to be possible. So I think there is that issue as well.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't at that planning committee. I'd given apologies for it, but I have looked it up as a result of this report, and it does say it's deferred subject to consultation with National Grid. So I think you're right about the pylon. Yeah, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I can quite remember this site because I actually sat on that panel as well, or committee.
Sorry, say again?
I was on that committee.
Right, okay.
And the power lines went straight across one of the buildings. And
right, okay.
National Power said they weren't happy with that. Yeah. And they wanted the buildings moved round.
Right, okay. Right. Shall we take a vote on this one? I think we probably should, because I appreciate it's slightly unusual because it has got a current application, but still, the recommendation of tonight, the draft allocation is not recommended. Could I have, does anybody want to move that? Councillor Parker, the seconder at all? Councillor Coleridge, thank you. So can I have a show of hands, please, that that's not recommended for allocation? Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Against? 1. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. So actually that's carried, isn't it? That site is not recommended at this early draft stage. Okay. Right. Thank you, Katerina. I just thought we needed to deal with that one. Thank you.
Site GRYE 2172, land at Waterhouse, Hedingham Road. 2171. No, because we're doing the employment now. Okay. 2172, land at Waterhouse, Hedingham Road. The site is being considered for employment allocation. This is a 0.3 hectare previously developed site, currently used for commercial storage, and it lies adjacent to other established commercial premises. The site benefits from suitable access and is the subject of current planning application, which has already been approved. The proposal seeks to deliver mixed commercial units supported by associated parking and landscaping, with a particular emphasis on retaining a central oak tree which contributes positively to the site's character. While the site is technically outside the defined settlement boundary, the presence of existing commercial infrastructure and the recent planning approval demonstrate that the proposal is compatible with the surrounding land uses and aligns with the broader strategic objectives of the local plan, particularly in supporting rural economic development. Given its countryside location, careful consideration was given to the landscape impact and integration. However, the approved scheme has shown that these concerns can be appropriately addressed through the design and mitigation. In summary, the site presents a suitable opportunity to support local employment, make use of previously developed land, and contribute to the vitality of the rural economy. Recommendation, therefore, proposes that site GRYE 2172 be allocated for development use in the local plan. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 323 to 327 on page 73 of the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you. I think Councillor Van Dalken touched on it, but I can't quite remember what he said. Apologies. Just to clarify, if this was to be allocated, no, that's to do with me, not Councillor Van Dalken. That's my frailty. But just to clarify, this protects the woodland walk and the access from the, in terms of the attraction, the Colne Valley Railway, there's a path that leads down to the water, there's a picnic area. That's not at risk, is there, with this? Because it's a particularly pleasant spot, and I would have thought it adds greatly to the attraction.
So that's okay, yep.
Yes.
All right. I think if there are no other comments, I think we can move on then on that one.
Now we have all the sites that were proposed for residential and self and custom built. So we have GRYE 2171, Woodpecker Court, Pool Street. This is a 0.74 hectares brownfield site with commercial buildings within the setting of 2 listed buildings, Cox Ferry Farmhouse and the Pool House. Previously, application for 26 dwellings was dismissed at appeal due to heritage and design concerns. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 318 to 322 on page 72 of the agenda.
Thank you.
May I continue?
Carry on.
Okay. Site GRYE 2173, land adjacent to 20 Richwell Road. 0.24 hectares, greenfield site proposed for self-built within an archaeological area and near a listed building. Appeal dismissed on grounds of countryside intrusion and character impact. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 328 to 332 on page 73 of the agenda.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, I agree with the recommendation. I just would point out that this is one of the land settlement houses, all had a small house built in an acre of land. I think we do have a policy, or certainly a bit of wording in our current local plan, not to allow these plots to be developed. Otherwise, we will have a lot of ribbon development all along these roads. So I agree with the officer's recommendation.
Right.
And happy to.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Right.
Site GRYE 2174, land south of Butler's Way, large greenfield site of 6.17 hectares with a capacity for 154 dwellings. No flooding or heritage constraints, but it is a significant intrusion into the countryside beyond the existing village form. Exceeds a sustainable scale of growth for a village of this size. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 333 to 337 on pages 73 to 74 of the agenda.
Councillor Parker.
Another quick comment.
Sorry?
I think the property there, which is sort of literally sitting underneath the letter Y, is a listed building, I think. So I can't remember what it's called.
Yes, yes.
So I just wonder whether there would be an impact on it, and whether that's an additional reason why we wouldn't.
Just to clarify with members, on the safeguarding map on the right-hand side, a blue solid indicates a Grade 2 listed building. If it's 2-star, it's lighter blue with hatching, and red is Grade 1 listed.
Okay, thank you.
Site GRYE 2175, land north of Little Yeldham Road. Yes. 6.36 hectares, greenfield site, has the capacity for 159 homes. Generally unconstrained, but the scale is disproportionate and not aligned with the village's growth capacity. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 338 to 342 on page 74 of the agenda.
Yeah. Yes.
Site GRYE 2176, land west of Nance Walk. 0.52 hectares brownfield site formerly used for agricultural storage. Poor vehicular access adjacent to flood zones 2 and 3 and heritage assets, including the conservation area. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 343 to 346 on page 74 of the agenda.
Yes. Thank you. Yep.
Today, we are presenting two sites in Great Yeldham, GRYE 2177 and GRYE 2178, both recommended for allocation to support self- and custom-built housing. These sites represent a good opportunity to diversify our housing supply and respond to growing local interest in community-led development. Let's go to site 2177 first. It's the land between 18 and 20 Topsfield Road. This is a 0.44 hectare greenfield site situated between two existing dwellings. The land is gently sloping, lies entirely within flood zone 1, and has no known surface water heritage or ecological constraints. Utility provision is feasible, although gas availability remains to be confirmed. The site is considered suitable for up to 10 self-built homes, while delivery may be phased as typical with self-built schemes. The scale and context of the proposal are well aligned with the local plan's objective to support modest, locally driven housing growth in rural areas. It's worth noting that the site is in close proximity to a local wildlife site. However, potential ecological impacts can be appropriately mitigated through the planning process. Detailed ecological assessments and necessary safeguards will be secured at the application stage to ensure full compliance with environmental standards. The site's infill nature, contained form, limited visual impact, and realistic development prospects make it a strong candidate for allocation. If we can have the photographs on the next. It offers an opportunity to diversify housing supply and empower local residents through self-built options. The recommendation, therefore, proposes that the site GRYE 2177 be allocated for self- and custom-built development. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 347 to 352 on page 75 of the agenda.
Thank you, Katerina. Anybody want to comment? No, I think you can move on to the next one, please.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Parker.
Could I just say that the report at 3.48 states that gas availability is unknown. There is no gas in Great Yeldham. I think when the Hannibal site that was granted permission, there was some facility that had to be put in to provide some kind of gas. So there is no gas in Great Yeldham.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Noted. Okay, thank you, Katerina.
The next site is GRYE 2178. It's land south of Topsfield Road. This is 0.23 hectares greenfield site proposed for self-built and was most recently used as a dog agility paddock. This smaller site also lies within flood zone 1 and has no known environmental or heritage constraints. It is modest in scale and well related to the existing settlement edge. Previously, planning applications and an appeal were dismissed due to landscape impact. But, if you can see the photographs, the site is a modest scale, well related to the settlement edge, and benefits from a visually contained setting. The surrounding hedgerows and countryside provide a natural buffer, allowing for sensitive integration with minimal landscape or visual intrusion. Furthermore, the local context has evolved. A nearby development, including new housing and an industrial estate to the north, is helping to reduce the site's perceived isolation and reinforce its suitability for limited residential use. While the site falls below the standard size threshold for allocation, it is recommended due to its specific suitability for self- and custom-built developments. This reflects the Council's commitment to diverse and inclusive housing strategy, supporting smaller-scale community-led schemes that align with rural housing objectives. This well-contained site is now seen as an organic, logical, and visually contained extension to the village, which aligns with Council support for self- and custom-built housing. The recommendation, therefore, proposes that the site GRYE 2178 be allocated for self- and custom-built development. Recommend for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 353 to 357 on page 75 of the agenda. In conclusion, both sites offer well-contained deliverable opportunities to support self- and custom-built housing in a way that respects the rural character of Great Yeldham while meeting local needs. They reflect our commitment to diverse, flexible, and community-focused housing strategy.
Thank you, Katerina. Any comments? No, don't see any. So, members, we have recommendations on page 69. Recommendation 1, that the inset maps for the village of Great Yeldham are approved for public consultation. And then the other recommendations, as outlined by Katerina, we have already voted on recommendation 3, site 2170. Would anybody like to move the other recommendations? Councillor Bowles-Flint, Councillor Parkhurst.
Would it be possible, Madam Chairman, to have separate votes on the two sites that are recommended for allocation, rather than dealing with all the sites en bloc?
10 and 11.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay, we can do. Somebody. So those are the two that are recommended for allocation. Would somebody like to move that?
Would it be possible to have them dealt with separately?
Sorry, 10.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Apologies. 10. Site 2177. First.
To move 10.
Move, Councillor Hyman. Second, Councillor Bowers. Is that find agreement? Right. Yes, it does. Councillor Shweer, were you? Oh, you're abstaining. Apologies, I wasn't quite sure if I'd missed your hand. Okay. So then, recommendation 11, site 2178. What? Sorry. Oh.
Against,
right.
Please. Thank you.
Apologise. Right. Let's make that clear. Right. That has been carried, that it is recommended for allocation, with Councillor Parker voted against, Councillor Shweer abstained. I got that right? Yes, okay. Right, recommendation 11, which is site 2178, was also recommended for allocation. Move Councillor Bowers, second Councillor Cunningham. Show of hands, please. Right, and any against, any abstentions? Councillor Shweer, but that's carried. Okay, so now we move back to recommendation 1, which is the inset maps, and the other recommendations other than 2170 and the last two that we've just already voted on. Councillor Flint, thank you. Move, and a seconder, please. Councillor Cunningham. Show of hands, members. Thank you very much. Right, good. Now, thank you. What I am going to propose is that we deal with Ridgewell, if that's okay, after which we will have a break. But we do have a speaker who's been working very patiently on Ridgewell. So if we can move to item 16 on the agenda, please. And I have Councillor Louise Beauchamp. Have I pronounced Beecham? Oh, we did debate about that. I Okay, thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Richwell Parish Council has embraced development of the village over the last few years, however wishes to formally reiterate its long-standing concerns regarding any further proposed development of the village as part of the current call for sites process. On several occasions, the Parish Council has submitted detailed objections and our position remains unchanged. Richwell is officially classified as an unsustainable village, primarily due to the absence of essential infrastructure and services such as public transport and local amenities, including a shop or healthcare services. The existing sewage infrastructure is already under considerable strain and is demonstrably inadequate to support the current population. In periods of heavy rainfall, one end of the village is particularly prone to flooding, often resulting in raw sewage being visible on the road and roadside, a serious environmental and public health concern. Furthermore, the sites submitted for consideration raise additional issues. Their development would likely affect the local water table, exacerbating flood risks and placing further pressure on already failing infrastructures. Several proposed sites are in close proximity to or directly adjacent to Grade 1 listed buildings, potentially threatening the historic character and heritage of the village. Others are situated near industrial areas, raising concerns about the appropriateness of these locations for residential use. The Parish Council is also dismayed to learn that 2 previously rejected sites have been resubmitted, despite having been turned down on appeal, including one decision upheld by the Secretary of State. While Ridgewell Parish Council acknowledges the broader need for housing, we strongly maintain that Ridgewell is unsuitable for further development for the reasons I have outlined this evening. We urge the subcommittee to give due consideration to the unique constraints and character of the village and to respect the findings of past planning decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beecham, very much. Right, so Katerina, I think you're taking this one.
Ridgewell is a 30-year small rural village located in the Braintree district, situated along the A1017 between Haverhill and Braintree. The village offers a modest level of services, including a primary school, church, village hall, 2 pubs and a takeaway. However, it lacks a shop and regular public transport, limiting residents' ability to meet the day-to-day needs locally and increasing reliance on private car. Ridgewell Parish Council notes the village population is approximately 574 according to 2021 census. It faces infrastructure challenges including poor drainage and sewage capacity, especially during heavy rainfall. These issues contribute to Ridgewell's designation as a territorially unsustainable village. The Council supports only sustainable heritage-sensitive growth. Of the 6 sites submitted, only 1 received conditional support. All others are opposed based on issues of scale, access, heritage impact, and infrastructure capacity. A total of 7 sites were submitted, proposing up to 187 dwellings across 7.3 hectares of land. All sites are located on the countryside setting of Ridgewell. Site-specific summaries reach RIDG 2245, rear of 8 Collins Springs, a small backland garden site restricted in size and access below threshold for local plan allocation. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 313 to 315 on page 125 of the agenda.
Yes.
Ridgewell 2246, north of Hall Lane, large site adjacent to a Grade 1 listed church and within a surface water flood risk area. Ecological and heritage constraints are significant. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 316 to 318 on page 125 of the agenda. Continue.
Yes, Katerina.
Read 2247, northwest of Ashen Road, a large greenfield site, proximity to listed buildings, access uncertainties, and lacks of services make this an unsuitable and unsustainable location. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 316 to 321 on pages 125 to 126 of the agenda.
Thank you.
Ridgewell 2248, east of Ashen Road, north of King's Head Public House. The only site with conditional parish support, however, lies within the conservation area, has heritage sensitivities, and suffers from access constraints. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 322 to 324 on page 126 of the agenda. Ridgewell 2511, south of Chapel Road, located near an archaeological site and within the SSSI impact risk zone. Despite location benefits, environmental risks outweigh suitability. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. Rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 325 to 327 on page 126 of the agenda. Final, Ridgewell 2512, adjacent Orchard Close, Mill Road, previously refused and appealed, heritage impact, rural character harm, and poor accessibility remained unresolved. Recommendation not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 328 to 330 on page 126 of the agenda. Conclusion, Ridgewell represents a clear example of a sensitive historic village with limited infrastructure and environmental capacity. As such, none of the proposed sites are suitable for allocation in the emerging local plan.
Thank you, Katerina. 187 dwellings is quite a lot for a very small village. Any comments, members? Councillor Parker?
Yes, I just want to make a comment about site Ridge 2511, which is land south of Chapel Road. I believe that was one of the sites that was rejected at appeal. I just wonder whether that could be mentioned in the report. There were two sites that
Very much.
Set a record.
We will crack on. So we'll go back up towards the top of the agenda to item 6, which is Foxearth. And this one is with Katerina, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Members. Foxearth is a small linear rural village located in the north of the Braintree district. Local services are extremely limited, with no shop, school or medical facilities, and the residents are reliant on Sudbury for essential amenities. Only one site was submitted for consideration through the call for sites in Foxearth. Site reference Foxy 2414, the Granary Mill Road. Proposed use residential development, site area 1.98 hectares, location southern edge of the village adjacent to the settlement boundary. After assessment against our established criteria, including infrastructure capacity, environmental and landscape constraints, and the emerging spatial strategy, the site is not considered suitable for allocation. The recommendation, the Foxy 2414, the Granary Mill Road, Foxearth, it's not allocated for development. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 3.4 to 3.8 on page 27 of the agenda.
Oh, right. Oh, very quick. Thank you, members. Wow. Okay. Right. That's good. Keeping me on my toes.
Alison, did you get a vote?
Alison, did you get the vote?
Did you get the vote?
Did you get? Yeah. Good. We just want to make sure that. Yeah. Fine. Okay. That's good. Now, just to keep us on our toes even more, we're going to take agenda item 7 next, Great Maplestead, but then follow that with item 12, Little Maplestead, and that's so that Councillor Schreer can leave the room for both of those and then come back in again, if you see what I mean. Right? Okay, so item 7 is the draft allocations for Great Maplestead, which is Katerina.
Great Maplestead is a small rural settlement located in the Gosfield and Greenstead Green ward. It is classified as a third-tier village in the settlement hierarchy of the Braintree district local plan. The village has a dispersed rural character, limited local services. The Great Maplestead Parish Council was submitted an objection to the development proposals, citing the village's classification as unsustainable due to its isolation, oversubscription of the primary school, lack of pavements, concerns about traffic volumes, and a projected population increase of over 1/3 from proposed developments and disproportionate housing density in the context of the existing village. The two sites were submitted through the 2024 call for sites, site assessment for GRMA 2167, land east of Liking Street, promoted for mixed use, is 0.4 hectares. The constraints were located on a narrow sea road with limited visibility and no footways, high landscape sensitivity, no confirmed service or utility infrastructure, detached from the main built-up area, leading to poor settlement integration. While there are no heritage or ecological constraints, the site's access limitations and rural setting render it unsuitable for allocation. Recommendation, GRMA 2167 is not to be allocated for development. Rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 310 to 321 on pages 34 to 35 of the agenda. Can I proceed?
Yes, you carry on.
The second site is GRMA 2168, Long Fen, Church Street. The size is 1 hectare, proposed use residential development, Access is via Church Street, an unclassified and narrow rural road. Key constraints: 2 public rights-of-way border the site, adverse impact on rural landscape character, recent planning history, 2 refused applications, both upheld at appeal due to poor access, landscape impact and planning policy conflict. No material change since those refusals. Given these long-standing and unresolved issues, the site remains unsuitable for development. Recommendation that GRMA 2168 Longfen is not allocated for development. Rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 222 to 329 on pages 35 to 36 of the agenda.
Thank you, Katerina. Right, members, recommendation that we approve the inset maps for consultation and those 2 sites not allocated. Councillor Monday moving. Seconder, Councillor Cunningham. Show of hands, please. Thank you, members. That's good. Right, so now we will just go down to item 12, Little Maplestead, please.
Little Maplestead, small dispersed rural village dominated by agricultural land and the landmark round church. No essential services, dependent on Halstead, narrow rural roads, no pavements and limited public transport. The parish council position, the parish council was neutral on LITM 2223 and LITM 2225, but concerned about partial consideration of LITM 2224. Let's go to the sites now. It's 3 in total. Site LITM 2223, Coke Road, Little Maplestead. While the site benefits from a flat topography, a field access point, and a proximity to recent development to the west, its location on the edge of the village represents an incremental approachment into open countryside. The recommendation for this site is not to be allocated, and the rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 38 to 313 on page 96 of the agenda. The next site is LITM 2224, land north of Coke Road, Little Maplestead. The site comprises flat open land with a prominent roadside frontage, and it's bordered by trees protected under the tree preservation order. While the site is free from known heritage, archaeological or ecological constraints and lies within flood zone 1, its development would result in a visibly intrusive expansion into the rural landscape. This site is not recommended for allocation, and the rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 314 to 318 on page 96 to 97 of the agenda. And last, site LITM 2225, land adjacent to Broomhill Cottage, Coke Road, Little Maplestead. The small site is proposed for self and custom built housing and benefits from flat terrain, flood zone 1 classification, and proposed access via existing driveway. While there are no known ecological or archaeological constraints and nearby listed buildings are sufficiently distant to allow for mitigation, the site's limited scale and peripheral location restrict its strategic value. This site is not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 320 to 325 on page 97 of the agenda.
Thank you, Katerina. Any comments, members? No. Move. Thank you, Councillor Bowers-Flint. Seconded by Councillor Bowers. Show of hands, please. Thank you, members. We just retrieve Councillor Schwer, and then we will move on.
10.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. Right, members, we now move to item 10, which is the draft allocations for Helian's Bumstead. Katerina.
Yeah. Helian's Bumstead is a small rural village located in the northwest of Range District, close to the Suffolk border, and approximately 3 miles southeast of Haverhill. The village is characterized by dispersed settlement pattern, historic rural character, and surrounding agricultural landscapes. It has considerably limited service to offer, with only village hall. Yes, full stop, sorry. One site was submitted during the 2024 call for sites. The site is the Heli 2206, land southeast of Haverhill Road, Pale Green. The parish council has strongly opposed to this proposal, raising significant infrastructure, environmental and social concerns, including the loss of productive farmland, proximity to chemical plants, and an aircraft stacking zone for Stansted Airport, risks to public health, biodiversity and protected species, and noise and air pollution. The threat to tranquility, ancient woodland, and local heritage. The site is not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 310 to 316 on page 82 of the agenda.
Thank you, Katerina. Comments? If not, would somebody like to move the inset maps are approved and that one site is not recommended? Councillor Bowers, Councillor Wright, were you seconding or did you want to speak? No, seconding. Thank you. Right, good. Yeah. I feel this is getting quite competitive now. Right, could I have a good night? Could I have a show of hands? Thank you. Thank you, members. Right, good. So, agenda item 11, we're moving on to draft allocations for La Marche.
Yes.
Yes, Katerina. Yeah, thank you.
We have again a small, La Marche is a small rural village in the north of the district, situated in the Stour Valley South Ward and located within the AONB project area. Has a dispersed settlement pattern with residential dwellings interspersed among farmland and mature vegetation along the village's lanes and roads. The village has seriously limited services and amenities. We had one site in the La Marche 2222, land between Hillrise and Stour Bures on Bures Road. It's a 0.29 hectare greenfield site situated between two existing dwellings on the western edge of the village. It has no recent planning history, no condemnation, and it's not crossed by public rights of way. However, it's below the threshold for allocation, and the recommendation is not to be recommended for allocation.
Right. Go, okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Abbott. Okay. And a seconder, please. Councillor Monday. A show of hands, please. Thank you, members. Right. Okay. Agenda item 13. Draft allocations for Ovington.
Right. Small rural village situated within the Stour Valley North Ward of the district, is characterized by an agricultural setting, low-density development, and a peaceful countryside atmosphere. The village has notably limited services and infrastructure, and residents are largely dependent on neighbour settlements for essential needs such as education, healthcare, retail, and employment. During the call for sites process, 2 sites were submitted for Ovington. Ovin 2226, south of Ashen Road, 0.95 hectares, capacity of 25 dwellings, and Ovington 2227, north of Ashen Road, 0.5 hectares, capacity of 14 dwellings. These sites are not recommended for allocation, and the rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided for the 2226 in paragraphs 3.8 to 3.11 on page 104 of the agenda, and for site Ovington 2227 provided in paragraphs 3.12 to 3.15 on page 104 of the agenda.
Thank you, Katerina. Right. Recommendation on the inset maps and those 2 sites which are not recommended for allocation. Councillor Abbott and Councillor Monday seconding. Show of hands, please. Thank you, members. Agenda item 14, draft allocations for Pedmarsh, which is in my ward. The parish council chairman did email me and say that he didn't want to speak, but he was minded to come along and listen, and I did advise him as he might like to stay at home, watch it on the YouTube channel, which I'm guessing he's probably quite pleased he did. Just thought he might not want to sit here quite so long. Right, Pedmarsh. Katerina?
Yes. Pedmarsh offers a modest but important range of local services, including primary school, village hall, public house, church, playing field and restaurant, which help meet the daily needs of its residents. The village benefits from a bus route connecting to Sudbury Halstead, providing some access to wider services. Despite this, Pedmarsh remains a strong rural character. Despite this, Pedmarsh maintains a strong rural character and a cohesive community. However, its limited infrastructure and service provision constrains its capacity for significant growth. Therefore, the village is not considered suitable for site allocations during the local plan period, although may accommodate limited infill or windfall developments where appropriate. As part of the 2024 call for sites, we had 4 proposals for housing. The sites: Pedmarsh 2229, land between Hillcrest and Stone Cottage, Clay Hills, a 0.34 hectare greenfield site between existing dwellings. Despite previous refusal for 8 dwellings in 2022 and its small size, it would still represent an unwanted extension into open countryside, not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 3.7 to 3.9 on pages 110 to 111 of the agenda. Site Pedmarsh 2230, Pearland Workshop, Beachlace Road, a 0.09 hectare brownfield site with existing access by a 2019 refusal for 4 dwellings. Its size and circumstances makes it more appropriate as a potential windfall site rather than allocation. Not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 310 to 312 on page 111 of the agenda. Pedmarsh 2231, land adjacent to Hillside, and 0.5 hectares. This is the only site meeting the minimum size for allocation. However, it lies on the village edge, would extend the built form into open countryside and lacks a strong sustainability case. Not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 313 to 315 on page 111 of the agenda. PEBMARS 2232, land adjacent to Great House Farm cottages. A small 0.05 hectare greenfield site, flat and unconstrained, but too small for strategic allocation. The site is not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 316 to 318 on page 111 of the agenda. PEBMARS 22 to 33, land opposite. PEBMARS 2233, land opposite Pearson Close water lane. A 0.1 hectare greenfield site with no major constraints but below the threshold for allocation. Not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 319 to 321 on page 111 of the agenda. PEBMARS 2509, land between Village Hall and St. John the Baptist Church, located within the PEBMARS conservation area and adjacent to the Grade 1 listed church. The sensitive site raises significant heritage concerns. It is below the minimum size for allocation, not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 322 to 324 on pages 111 to 112 of the agenda. In conclusion, none of the submitted sites are recommended for allocation due to their size, location, heritage constraints, and the village's limited infrastructure and sustainability considerations.
Thank you, Katerina. Comments, members? No? We have recommendations that the inset maps for PEBMARS are approved for public consultation, and recommendations 2 down to 7, none of those sites are recommended for allocation. Councillor Abbott and Councillor Wright. Oh, sorry, Councillor Parker.
Sorry, just a little question. It's just the inset map and the village boundary. I know it's in your ward, Madam Chairman, but there are sort of three houses on the lane on one of the sites. Or I've forgotten what the lane is called. It's not on. Yes, there. But if I don't know whether those are new properties, but would one normally be revising the boundary around those properties? Sorry.
Yes, Alan.
Yes,
yeah,
we would normally draw around around a new development if it had taken place.
Yes.
So we can do a.
Yes, they are new.
Yes, they're new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So would the inset map be amended then to?
Yes, we'll make sure that's done. Thank you. Well, thanks for mentioning that. Right, that has been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands? Thank you, members. Right, we move on to item 15, draft allocations for Pentlow. Katerina, I think.
Page 23, please. Now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Pentlow is characterized by its dispersed settlement pattern, agricultural landscape, and significant historic and environmental sensitivity. The parish has limited services and infrastructure. As part of the 2024-25 call for site process, 2 sites were submitted for consideration in Pentlow. Both have been assessed with regard to planning history, site access, environmental constraints, and potential landscape impact. Given the parish's highly sensitive setting, each site required carefully and thorough evaluation. A site assessment for Pent 2234, barn north of Power Hall Lane. This is a 0.09 hectare site comprising previously developed land and on a dead-end rural lane with poor access. It lies within flood zone 3. The site is adjacent to Cherry Tree Barn, a Grade 2 building. It does not meet the sequential test due to flood risk and is below the minimum threshold for allocation. The site is not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 3.6 to 3.8 on page 118 of the agenda. Site Pendlow, 2418, north of School Road. This 0.38 hectare greenfield site was submitted for housing or alternative community uses, such as a children's play area. However, the site is heavily constrained. It lies within the Dedham Vale project area with a SSI impact risk zone, and it's crossed by a public right-of-way. These environmental and landscape designations make development... Sorry, what's the next? Excuse me. 18. Yeah, 23. Excuse me. Make development difficult to justify, even for lower impact community users. The site is not recommended for allocation. The rationale and supporting details for this recommendation are provided in paragraphs 3.9 to 3.11 on page 118 of the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Katerina. Any comments? No? So recommendation is that we approve the inset maps for Pentlow for public consultation and those two sites which are not recommended for allocation. Councillor Bowers, Councillor Butland seconding. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you, everybody. Right, so that concludes tonight's business because we have no urgent business. I think that's a really good effort from officers, thank you very much, and members. Slightly to my surprise, we're actually finishing at 9:45. Thought we might be a bit later, but we've got the difficult stuff. Yes, yes, so well done, thank you.